All right, we mentioned it already. It is a big game that we're going to have midweek. Or we thought it would be a big game. It's kind of a weird one to talk about now, isn't it? This Champions League fixture between Leverkusen and Bayern. Um, Xabi Alonso in his press conference was asking or saying, "Well, we believe in a miracle." That's what I think it will take. To be honest with you, if you thought this was going to be hard for Leverkusen to overturn, it just got increasingly harder because Florian Wirtz will be out with an ankle injury after Leverkusen's defeat to Werder Bremen, which I thought was an infuriating match to begin with, because if there was any sort of hope that Leverkusen could maybe re-enter the title race and make this what turns is increasingly becoming a boring Bundesliga season, to be honest with you, more exciting. Leverkusen completely threw that away. Rather than 5 points after Bayern's surprise defeat to Bochum on the 125th birthday celebrations, Leverkusen did absolutely nothing against Bremen and lost 2-0 to Werder Bremen, who I actually thought were excellent as well. It's a really big 3 points for them after a season that seemed to go sideways. They really get something really big here. Wirtz comes on in the second half. I saw someone say on Blue Sky Wirtz gets injured because this Leverkusen team can't figure out how to win without him. And they can't. They really need to rest him at some point, but they can't, because whenever they rest him, this team just falls apart. And then he comes on, and he probably has been overplayed as it is already. And then he comes on and he gets hurt. And I actually think, Bremen got lucky there. Looking at the replay of this particular foul, if VAR takes a look at it, I think that's a red card. But here we are. No Florian Wirtz, and thankfully it's international break, and thankfully it's not the torn capsula that they were worried about initially. But he's out for this match, right? And so Leverkusen are now facing a 3-0 deficit against Bayern Munich without Florian Wirtz, and looking at the way they played against Werder Bremen, I'm not even sure it's worth tuning into this game.
Yeah, I mean, this is another game that I managed to watch the weekend, and I mean, I wouldn't say it was calamitous as Dortmund's defeat to Augsburg. Although having said that, I think Dortmund played a better team in Augsburg than Werder Bremen are right now. But yeah, it was just a game that, as you said, that Leverkusen did without Wirtz. He obviously did start the game. He came on at half time and then obviously went back off 15 minutes later when he picked up the injury. And I completely agree with you. It was it wasn't a dirty one from Mitchell Weiser. It was just a nasty one. And when Wirtz went off, he gave the referee a good bollocking, to be perfect, because he was furious that nothing came of it. And I think you're absolutely right. I think he has been overplayed. I think he looked like a frustrated, jaded player in that Bayern Munich game. He's looked quite tired for a couple of weeks now. He's only picked up 1 assist in his last 6 or 7 league games. And we've been saying this for weeks. If Leverkusen just kind of fall back on this thing of, it's all right, Wirtz will save the day. And they didn't start him in this game. It was, and as a result, things weren't particularly great. And it's interesting that when Wirtz isn't in this team, who the kind of expectations fall on to kind of create chances. I actually thought Garcia was probably one of the better players this game, but I don't know. It just felt like the whole team were just tired. They were jaded. They were shell-shocked maybe from the Bayern Munich game. And it was just a system that didn't really quite make sense because it didn't have Wirtz in it. Poor Buendia had been kind of thrown in to kind of play the Wirtz role. Adley was in there as well, to very little luck. They had Artur on the right. They had Nathan Tell on the left. And it just didn't really work. And instead, Werder Bremen were just this really impressive kind of counter-attacking team. They kind of went back to their basics, their basics in the sense that that's what they were good at when they were kind of right up the league table, They had Romano Schmidt back, who was a big player that had been missing for a while now, who obviously got a goal like 7 minutes into the game, which is a really tidy finish, actually. It's nice to be kind of play from Werder Bremen, actually. So it just felt like a very determined Bremen side against a jaded, tired Leverkusen team that just didn't really know what to do without Florian Wirtz. And that's going to be really interesting to see what they do going forward. I've actually wrote my newsletter this week on Wirtz, and the headline is something along the lines of, what does Xabi Alonso's one-man team do without their one man? And he is the guy who kind of just galvanizes that team. And I drew an interesting comparison. Well, I thought it was interesting to Pep Guardiola's Barcelona team, which was, a team that were obviously full of world-class players and outstanding players who, would be stars in any other team, but they were very much a team built around Lionel Messi and built around the idea that if we all do our jobs, Lionel Messi will find some way to win this Champions League final or win this El Clasico or whatever. And that's what Messi always did. Now, I'm not saying Florian Wirtz is Lionel Messi, but it's a similar system, and it's a similar kind of it's a similar way that Alonso's team goes about things, to the extent that he's now reverted to, in these big games against Bayern Munich and the likes, just not even playing any forwards. Just play Florian Wirtz, stick him up front with Nathan Tella, let's have Grimaldo and Frimpong running the lines, and then let's just see what Wirtz can do with that. And it's insane. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, it's a shame that that's now led to him picking up an injury. Luckily, it's not a big serious one like we've seen serious early in his career. He's expected back in 3 or 4 weeks, so he should be okay in that regard. But it does now mean that Leverkusen have to go the rest of the season. I was kind of smirking when Simon Rolfes said, he'll be back before the end of the season. So he'll be back in time for the business end of the season. And I thought, Simon, your season will be finished by April. Like, yeah, okay, maybe there's a Pokal final he can take part in where you have to beat Leipzig, or was it Freiburg? No, who are the 2 teams in the semi-final?
They have Bielefeld.
I know they have Bielefeld, but they don't need him for the Bielefeld game. I'm even thinking who they trying to remember who they'll get in the. I watched that game recently.
Leipzig. Stuttgart Leipzig.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, okay, maybe he'll be back in time for that final against one of those 2 teams. But let's be honest, by the time he gets back to full fitness, they'll be out of the Champions League. They'll be probably 10 points behind Bayern in the Bundesliga.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's just like the first time that Alonso's had to deal with his team without Florian Wirtz. And going into this Bayern Munich game, I kind of made a joke on Blue Sky that perish the thought, but Xabi Alonso might actually have to put out a normal attacking formation against Bayern Munich. He might actually have to play strikers, and he might have to actually support them with some wingers, and he might actually have to play some sort of attacking midfielders to compensate for the lack of Florian Wirtz, So we might actually get something resembling a more traditional starting 11 from Leverkusen in this game against Bayern. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because, the thing is, if throughout this entire run that Alonso's had at Leverkusen, and nobody could argue that it's been incredible and they've made history and he deserves all his plaudits, and he will go off to, coach Liverpool or Real Madrid or whatever else. But he has been able to do all of this with Florian Wirtz, with peak Florian Wirtz at the top of his game, winning matches, almost single-handedly, to the extent that team last year that won the Bundesliga, we could, time and time again, they would get these kind of last-minute goals through Wirtz, through Boniface, through Grimaldo, or whoever else. But everything was built around Wirtz. And the comparisons to Pep Guardiola's Barcelona with Messi, I think, are interesting, because since then, despite the amount of money that Pep Guardiola has spent at all the clubs he's coached at, I don't think these teams have ever really matched what they had with Messi, because no one has ever been able to be Messi at Bayern Munich or Messi at Manchester City or whatever else. And it'll be interesting to see if Alonso can actually spend these next 3 or 4 weeks showing what he would do with Leverkusen without Wirtz winning the games for them every week, whether that's the Champions League or the Bundesliga. And he's got a real test in his hands, because obviously they've got to make up a 3-goal deficit against Bayern Munich in the Champions League without their main playmaker and their second top goal scorer.
Yeah, no, I personally think it's going to be an incredibly hard task. Again, Alonso, saying we want to win this game so Florian Wirtz can play Champions League again this year. I think, in terms of the Bundesliga, I agree with you. I've said this a few times now. I think that the Bundesliga is wrapped up. All my little bit of tiny 1% rest hope I had was thrown away with the Leverkusen's defeat to Bremen. I think if they had beaten Bremen and Bayern had lost to Bochum, like Bayern lost to Bochum, obviously they did. If Leverkusen actually managed to beat Bremen, I would have, maybe my ears would have perked up a little bit, because then all of a sudden it's 5 points. Bayern surprisingly dropping points against an opponent where they really shouldn't have. After a 2-0 win, a lead as well, we haven't really seen them do this. And then maybe there would have been some vulnerability creeping back in here, and then, talk about what happened to Bayern Munich last year, where they threw away points left, right, and center after leads. And then maybe would have also brought up some question marks about Tuesday's fixture. Leverkusen all of a sudden going in on a high, breathing down Bayern Munich's neck again in the Bundesliga. I think it would have changed the entire narrative. Unfortunately, it didn't.